Hello, I'm Dr. David Clark, UFO expert and lecturer in journalism at Sheffield Hallam University. In October 2008, the National Archives are opening a collection of UFO material transferred from the Ministry of Defence under the Freedom of Information Act. It's the second release of UFO files this year, and it's the part of a 3 to 4 year transfer of some 160 files in all. This particular collection contains somewhere in the region of 4,500 separate pages of material and some 19 files in all. I'm going to be showing some of the highlights from this material, and to see the files, go to the National Archives website, nationalarchives.gov.uk/UFOs. One of the key highlights from these files is a report from April 1991. And this involved a near miss between an Italian airliner and a UFO in the skies over Kent. The report was made to the Civil Aviation Authority, and the pilot described in his official report the missile-shaped object, beige in colour, that moved from east to west across his field of vision from the cockpit. And he was so surprised when he saw this thing that he called out to his co-pilot, "Look out, look out!" And the co-pilot also saw this strange object, and immediately they contacted air traffic control and said, "Do you see anything?" And they said, "Yeah, we see an object behind the aircraft quite clearly, primary return." This incident was investigated by the Ministry of Defence and also by the Civil Aviation Authority, and they checked to see if any real missile had been fired, perhaps by one of the Army Rangers or from a ship at sea, ruled out all the usual explanations, and the end result was that this was a genuine UFO, and the file was simply closed. There was nothing more they could do. The report by the Italian aircrew was just the first of a series of similar incidents reported to the MOD in 1991. There were two other near-miss incidents in the same year, but with a month separating them. The first one in June 1991, there was a report from 4 passengers in a 737 en route from Gatwick to Hamburg, and they reported seeing something which they described as a wingless projectile flying beneath the aircraft as they were taking off. They reported this to the pilot, and the incident was reported back to the Ministry of Defence and Civil Aviation Authority for an investigation. While that investigation was going on, in July 1991, there was another report made by the crew of a 737 that was descending into Gatwick over the English countryside, and they reported seeing something which they described as a dark lozenge-shaped object zooming by the side of the aircraft. This again was reported to air traffic control, and air traffic control confirmed that they had what they described as a primary contact on radar, and they were so concerned about this thing that they warned another aircraft that was descending behind the 737 to take evasive action, and this aircraft turned to the left to avoid this unidentified object. And it appeared to be heading towards the aircraft initially, but then turned away. The captain of the second aircraft didn't actually report seeing anything visually. Now, there was a full investigation of both these incidents. One of them was officially reported as a near miss, and they were unable to explain what had been seen. The best guess that they could make was that possibly what had been seen in these two cases was some kind of balloon, perhaps a meteorological balloon or perhaps a toy balloon. But again, there's a huge question mark over what this particular UFO may have been. Now, we've looked at cases in these files where the crews of civil airliners have reported near misses with UFOs, but there are also a few incidents in these files where military pilots, fighter pilots, have reported mysterious objects, things that have been seen on radar and sometimes visually. Now, the most impressive case in this particular collection actually happened at the height of the Cold War, one dark night either in 1956 or 1957. And the reason this case didn't emerge until the 1980s was that the pilot involved, who was a member of the United States Air Force 406th Fighter Bomber Wing, he didn't actually talk about what had happened until 32 years later, when he returned to the base RAF Manston in Kent, where the incident occurred. And he was there for a reunion, and he met up with some of his colleagues from that time, and they started talking about their experiences. Now, on this particular night, again, we need to remember this was right at the height of the Cold War, shortly after the Suez Crisis, the invasion of Hungary. He was on 24-hour alert, ready to be scrambled in case there was any hostile movements of Soviet aircraft. And on this particular night, he was ordered to scramble at short notice, sometime around midnight. It was a very dark night, typical English weather, and he was scrambled to a position which he recalls as being 32,000 feet over the East Anglian countryside. And he was told by an RAF ground controller that they had been watching a mysterious object, mysterious movements on radar for some time, and he'd been sent to intercept this thing and find out what it was. An unusual mission in some respects, but it was to get even stranger. He was guided to where this thing was seen on radar from the ground, and when he got within 15 miles of this mysterious object, his own airborne radar was then able to lock onto it. And he turned towards it. He was asked to see if he could see anything visually. He peered out of the cockpit, but he could see nothing, just dark clouds. He got within 15 miles of this thing. He got a lock on his radar, and he said that this thing was very, very clear on his radar scope. It was huge, the size of a B-52 bomber. Absolutely no doubt that there was something there. Now, the next thing that happened, he was ordered from the ground to arm his aircraft and fire a full salvo of his rockets. Now, he had 24 of these things, quite deadly weapons, and he was really, really surprised and shocked to be told to do this, because he had never before been ordered to shoot anything down, particularly an aircraft that was unidentified. Remember, this was over East Anglia at the time, very, very unusual. So he queried the order, and within a few seconds, this was confirmed from the ground. And as he was selecting his weapons, this thing that he'd captured on his radar suddenly started moving, disappeared from the scope, and he reported this back to his ground control, and they said, yes, it's disappeared from our scope as well, in 2 sweeps of the radar going at some fantastic speed. That was the end of the mission, as far as he was concerned. He returned to RAF Manston and spoke to ground control. They said he would be debriefed. The next day, someone arrived from London, quite clearly another American, someone from one of the national security agencies, and he was basically told in no uncertain terms that what he'd seen on his radar was a top secret, and he wasn't to speak about it to anyone. And he was warned that if he did break this his security oath, he would be grounded, and for a pilot that was the worst thing that could happen. So he basically kept this quiet for 32 years, and it wasn't until 1988 that he finally decided to talk about it. Now, when this reached the media and ufologists, a ufologist in Manchester wrote to the MOD and wanted to find out what official records were kept on this particular incident. And the MOD, according to these papers, actually went to have a look in the archives, and they found that, unfortunately, all the records before 1962 about UFO incidents had been destroyed. So they could not give an explanation as to what had been seen. They advised the inquirer to contact the United States Air Force archives, which he did, and they again said there was no records. We've never heard of this incident. But there's no doubt that something very unusual happened. Was it really a UFO? Was it some kind of Soviet aircraft that had been seen? If so, who gave the orders to fire on it, and why? The only other possible explanation is that maybe the pilot was involved in some kind of experiment involving electronic warfare, because we now know, because the CIA have admitted this, that they did have a program in the 1960s called Palladium, which involved the creation of phantom aircraft on radar, and this was done basically to fool the Russians, and so that they could test the capabilities of Russian radar systems. And so maybe there's a remote possibility that perhaps what this pilot had seen was some kind of experiment in electronic warfare, or maybe it was a UFO. I hope you have enjoyed my video documentary. If you'd like to examine some of these UFO reports in more detail, please go to the National Archives website, which is nationalarchives.gov.uk/UFOs.